G'day, legends, and welcome back to Midnight Narratives, where we uncover the creepiest true stories hidden in Australia's backroads, basements, and forgotten files. Today, we're shining the torch on one place in particular, the regional city of Mildura, perched on the banks of the Murray River. It's known for sunshine, citrus, and wine, but beneath that golden surface, something darker is stirring. These are 5 true stories from Mildura's past, filled with murder, mystery, and secrets buried deeper than the old irrigation channels. And if you're from Mildura yourself, well, you might want to leave the lights on tonight. Francis O'Brien, the Mildura headmaster who snapped. In the summer of 1934, the quiet farming town of Mildura bore witness to one of the most disturbing crimes in Victorian history. A tragedy so dark it would haunt the town for decades. It involved a man respected in the community, Francis O'Brien, a former headmaster of Mildura High School. He was an educated man, a figure of authority and discipline. But on a grim November morning, the mask of normalcy shattered, revealing something horrific underneath. Francis O'Brien was found dead in his home, alongside the lifeless bodies of his wife and 3 young children. All had been murdered, poisoned, it was believed, before O'Brien took his own life with a straight razor. It was a textbook murder-suicide, but the details suggested a far more chilling premeditation. Next to O'Brien's body, police found a book titled Preparation for Death. Scribbled annotations in the margins hinted at a long internal struggle, a man obsessed with sin, guilt, and retribution. But the horror didn't end there. When detectives dug deeper into O'Brien's past, they uncovered something even more shocking. This wasn't his first time. Nearly 10 years earlier, his first wife had died under suspicious circumstances. It was ruled an accident at the time, a fall in the kitchen that resulted in fatal blunt force trauma. But now, with the events of 1934 casting a new light, investigators believed he'd murdered her as well, using a hammer, then covered it up. Friends and neighbours described him as peculiar, but not dangerous. He was known to be strict, a disciplinarian, always sharply dressed, always reading. Some recalled how, in the months before the murders, he began speaking about the sins of the family and cleansing the bloodline. Most brushed it off as religious rambling. No suicide note was ever found, only cryptic entries in the margins of his book, some of them seemingly written in code. One line read, "Better to die clean than live filthy." Another simply said, "The door must be shut for good." The house where the murders occurred stood empty for years. Locals say strange things happened there afterward, lights flickering without power, doors slamming, and the constant creak of floorboards even when the place was vacant. It was finally demolished in the late 1950s, but people in town still speak of the O'Brien curse and how Mildura's most trusted educator hid something monstrous behind his scholarly face. The Cardross crash, death on Mile Street. On a warm Saturday night in February 2006, the small town of Cardross, just outside Mildura, was shattered by a tragedy that remains one of the darkest chapters in the region's recent memory. At about 9:50 p.m., a group of local teenagers was walking along Mile Street after spending the evening at a nearby friend's place. It was just a typical night in a close-knit rural town. Kids talking, laughing, walking the roads that had always felt safe. Then came the roar of an engine. Out of the darkness came a Ford EA Falcon utility vehicle, driven by 35-year-old Thomas Graham Toll. He had been drinking and had earlier taken his 6-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter on an unlicensed joyride, speeding recklessly across rural roads. Toll lost control as he swerved to avoid a shallow drain, mounted the embankment, and plowed straight into the group of teenagers. The force was catastrophic. 6 teenagers were killed: Corey and Adam Hannigan, Abby and Shane Minter, Steve Cummings, and Tyler Fenton. Several others were left with life-altering injuries. Some were flung meters into nearby fields. A few survivors later described the sound of bones breaking, the smell of burnt rubber, and the silence that followed, pierced only by agonized screams. What made it worse was Toll's response. After mowing down the teens, he crashed into a pole, panicked, and fled on foot, leaving his children behind in the vehicle and the scene in chaos. He hid overnight and was only arrested the following day. It was later revealed he was under the influence of alcohol and had a long history of driving offenses. He showed little remorse during trial, claiming the crash was just an accident. The tragedy devastated Cardross. Mildura locals turned up in the hundreds for memorials and vigils. Handmade crosses were hammered into the dirt along Mile Street, where flowers and letters from classmates and friends gathered like offerings. For months, the town was frozen in collective grief. Survivors suffered PTSD, and families were shattered forever. Toll was eventually found guilty on multiple counts of culpable driving causing death and sentenced to 10 years in prison, a sentence many felt was insultingly lenient given the scale of the tragedy. Years later, Mile Street still feels haunted. Locals report that every February, the air seems heavier near the site. Some say they've seen figures walking the roadside at night, flickering just outside the reach of headlights, and heard the sound of voices whispering when the road is otherwise silent. Whether it's lingering trauma or something else, one thing is certain: Cardross will never forget that night. It wasn't just a crash, it was a collision with death itself. The Mildura Mafia, blood in the fruit bowl. Mildura is best known for its sun-kissed vineyards and orchards. But in the 1970s and 80s, something far darker was taking root. A criminal undercurrent most residents never saw coming. In the heart of Australia's fruit bowl, the Calabrian Mafia, also known as the Ndrangheta, had quietly established one of their most secretive outposts. It started slowly. Rumours of threats between rival fruit growers, families keeping quiet about stolen equipment. But behind the scenes, there were whispers of extortion, large-scale drug trafficking, and illegal gambling. The Ndrangheta had infiltrated legitimate businesses, especially in produce transport, using Mildura's agricultural economy as both cover and cash flow. Then came the murder. In April 1982, Mildura greengrocer Dominic Marifiote and his elderly parents were gunned down in their home. It was a professional hit. No signs of robbery, no warning, just silence followed by blood. Dominic had allegedly refused to cooperate with Mafia demands. Police suspected organised crime immediately, but nobody talked. Fear ran deep. Even local media tiptoed around the truth. One Mildura police officer, who later spoke anonymously, said investigating the case was like trying to swim with your hands tied behind your back. Witnesses vanished, evidence disappeared, nobody wanted to be the next name on a list. Federal authorities began quietly investigating mafia activity in the area. Mildura appeared in intelligence reports linking Calabrian families across Australia: Griffith, Melbourne, Adelaide, all connected by blood, business, and a strict code of silence. Local politicians urged residents to report suspicious activity, but behind closed doors, fear kept mouths shut. The worst part? Many of the men involved were respected in public. They donated to schools, built churches, and waved politely at neighbours, all while ordering hits and laundering money through fruit export. While the killings eventually stopped, the Marifiote murders remain unsolved. The files sit cold in archives, the evidence inconclusive, the perpetrators never named. Some locals believe the killers were flown out of the country within 24 hours, hidden by a web of loyalty and bloodlines. And though the Ndrangheta's grip on Mildura may have loosened, old-timers still keep an eye on who's planting what and who's buying up land, because some things, once buried, have a way of growing back stronger than ever. The axe murders of Urith and Brian Stevens, 1960, domestic horror in the Mallee. In 1960, the people of Mildura awoke to the kind of crime they thought only happened in city slums or far-off places. Instead, it happened right on their doorstep, inside a modest family home on Walnut Avenue. Stanley Victor Stevens was a World War II veteran and orchardist. To outsiders, he was a quiet, hard-working man, a bit odd, maybe, but not dangerous. He lived with his wife, Urith, Edna, and their 13-year-old son, Brian. The family was known in the community, attended church, and mostly kept to themselves. But beneath the surface, Stanley had grown increasingly paranoid and detached. On a cold September morning, neighbors noticed something was wrong. The Stevens house was silent. No breakfast clatter, no Brian rushing to school. One neighbor, concerned, knocked. When no one answered, they entered through the back and found horror. Urith was dead in the lounge room, her head caved in with a heavy wood axe. Brian lay in his bedroom, also struck fatally. Blood pooled thickly on the floorboards. The axe was found discarded in the backyard. Stanley was missing. Police launched a manhunt, and he was found hours later wandering disoriented near the river. He offered no resistance. In fact, he barely spoke. When questioned, he reportedly muttered only, "They were already gone, I just made it right." The trial that followed was quiet, but chilling. Stanley didn't deny the murders. He claimed he was cleansing them, saying his family had been replaced by imposters, a delusion rooted in untreated schizophrenia. The court declared him criminally insane and committed him to a psychiatric institution. Locals were horrified, not just by the crime, but by how silently it had festered. Teachers recalled Brian as polite and quiet, always careful not to upset anyone. Urith was described as warm, always smiling. No one saw it coming. The Stevens home sat abandoned for years. Eventually it was torn down, but residents still remember the address. Some say you can still hear crying late at night if you walk past the empty block, or the sound of a blade dragging on linoleum. It's one of Mildura's darkest domestic crimes. A perfect family image shattered in one morning, and a reminder that sometimes evil doesn't come from strangers. It grows quietly behind familiar doors. The legend of Mildura's underground tunnels echoes beneath the river city. Ask anyone who grew up in Mildura, and chances are they've heard the whispers about tunnels beneath the town, running from the historic Rio Vista mansion to the Murray River, and even further. Most folks will laugh it off, call it old folklore, but others swear they have seen the dark underbelly themselves. The Rio Vista house, built in 1889 by Canadian-born citrus pioneer William Benjamin Chaffee, sits proudly above the riverfront, a symbol of Mildura's founding wealth. It's now a museum, but staff and historians alike have long spoken of sealed-off basements, bricked-in doorways, and air vents that lead nowhere. Stories date back to the early 1900s. One tale tells of workers during the Great Depression hired to reinforce a water tunnel behind the house, who reported that the shaft extended much further than expected, disappearing into pitch black. Others recall strange maintenance passages near the paddle steamer docks, some wide enough to walk through. In the 1930s, Mildura's wine and spirit industry was booming, and so was smuggling. Some believe the tunnels were used to transport illegal liquor or house Chinese immigrants avoiding deportation. One former council worker claimed in the 70s that he entered a hidden tunnel behind the council chambers and walked 300 meters before being forced to turn back by a sudden drop, and the overwhelming feeling he wasn't alone. More unsettling are the stories of disappearances. In 1951, a local boy named Peter Bell reportedly vanished while playing near the Rio Vista grounds. His bike was found at the rear of the mansion, leaning against a wall. He was never found. No formal link was ever made to the tunnels, but residents still connect the dots in hushed tones. Over the years, amateur explorers have tried to locate the entrances. Some succeeded in finding crawl spaces, but all report the same thing: sudden cold, total silence, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. In 2022, an ABC article reignited interest in the legend when a local man digging in his backyard struck an old concrete shaft, capped and sealed in a manner far older than the surrounding infrastructure. Council engineers said it was just an old drain, but he isn't so sure. Even if the tunnels never served a sinister purpose, the psychological weight they carry in the community is undeniable. It's not just what may be underneath the town, it's that no one seems to know for sure. And there you have it, 5 true stories that prove even the quietest places can hide the darkest secrets. From unsolved murders to hidden tunnels, Mildura isn't just sunshine and citrus. It's a town with shadows of its own. If you're from Mildura, did you know about these? Drop a comment below and let me know which story hit hardest. And while you're there, tell me your town. I might just dig into your local history next. If you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you like your stories slow, spooky, and straight out of the Aussie bush. I'm back every week with real tales that make you double check the locks. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your mind open. This has been Midnight Narratives, signing off from the shadows.